It is my honor to invite Dr. Paul Gavrilyuk to speak to us today. Dr. Gavrilyuk is the Aquinas Chair in Theology and Philosophy at the University of St. Thomas. He is an internationally respected theologian and the author of numerous publications translated into 10 languages. He was born in Ukraine's capital, Kiev. As the situation in Ukraine deteriorated, his elderly parents, including mother, who is a pianist and professor of piano in Kiev Conservatory, were evacuated and became refugees. In response to the immense humanitarian catastrophe now unfolding in the war-torn country, Dr. Gavrilyuk founded Rebuild Ukraine, a non-profit organization that provides medical supplies and protective gear to civilian defense volunteers and helps the children affected by war. He will share with you how you can help rebuild Ukraine.
Laura, thank you so much for your words. I think the outpouring of compassion has been quite extraordinary. And that is precisely, in many ways, what our organization, Rebuild Ukraine, runs on. About a few hours into the war, a friend in London alerted me to the fact that the war started with the words, "It is happening." I immediately called up my parents and we began a plan for their evacuation. As you know, the war started on February 24th. It was completely unprovoked. It was an invasion that Putin expected to be swift, but the Ukrainian people have put up tremendous resistance, and of course Putin himself miscalculated and then subsequently resorted to the large-scale destruction of cities. You may have seen the photos of this image of the bombing of the bridge that became a temporary shelter for the residents of Irpin, which is a suburb about 15 miles from Kyiv. This is a photo of a university. It's a photo of the economics department in the University of Kharkiv. Kharkiv itself is the second largest city in Ukraine, and this is the economics department, bombed again in the first days of the war. Again, many of you have seen the images of the maternity ward bombed in Mariupol in March, with several mothers and also infants being wounded as a result of the Russian attack. We all realize that any war is the war on children because they bear the scars of the war in the most profound manner. In the same city of Mariupol that by now has been reduced to rubble, children and elderly were hiding in this drama theater that was turned into a bomb shelter. The drama theater itself was specifically marked, and you can see in 2 areas there are markings saying children or deti in Russian, specifically so that the Russian bombers would see that this is an area for civilians to hide. And this is what happened to the theater a few hours later. As you can see, it was bombed to pieces, and the number of victims reported presently is approaching 600. Now, as a result of the bombing of the civilian areas, there are at least 3 major challenges that are presently faced by Ukraine internally. The first main challenge is the damage to infrastructure that creates food, water, heating, and also medical supplies shortages. The second significant challenge is the question of equipping Ukraine's defenders. These are volunteers. These are civilians like you and me, teachers, students, engineers, business people, even unemployed men and women. The Ukrainian army has a fairly large number of women who have now joined the forces, the armed forces of their country in the resistance against the Russian aggression. Of course, nobody expected that incredible amount of Ukrainian resistance. As you know, Ukrainian armed forces have managed to keep the Russian army from seizing control of most major cities. President Zelensky early on made an important historical strategic decision to remain in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. And now we have the swelling of these voluntary units, almost 300,000 of them, rising to the defense of their country. Of them, 70,000 Ukrainian men and women, in fact, returned from abroad so that they could fight for their independence. This is Ukraine's war of independence. And I think it's also especially heartening to know that 20,000 army veterans have arrived from other countries. Now, the matter is personal to me because this is a very close friend who teaches philosophy like I do here. He does it in the capital in Kyiv. And as you can see, he is still a philosopher by night, but he has also become a sniper by day. And as I will relate to you in the second part of my presentation, Rebuild Ukraine has provided specifically a sniper backpack for him. But I asked myself one question, and that is, why am I not fighting as my friend is? And he has now been in 2 highly dangerous missions and is now presently deployed to Kharkiv. So I asked myself the question, why am I not back in Ukraine fighting? And the only answer that would possibly satisfy me was, well, I am an academic, so I will choose to fight by peaceful means. And that is ultimately what we're trying to achieve with Rebuild Ukraine. Why is my friend fighting? Well, he is a father of 4 children and has 1 child that he adopted. And so he's fighting so that these children, and these are 2 children from a family that are now refugees in Poland, so that these children could have a country to return to. And so, to give you the big picture, the international support for Ukraine has been quite substantial. As you know, there have been economic and diplomatic sanctions imposed on Russia, and also the United States and its NATO allies have provided significant and are providing significant military aid. What I would like to focus on in the second part of my presentation is precisely the efforts that the nonprofits are making in the area of humanitarian support, zeroing in on our local initiative, namely on Rebuild Ukraine. So I'd like in the second part of what I'm about to tell you, I would like to speak about why we created Rebuild Ukraine, what type of aid we are presently providing into Ukraine and also for the refugees, and more importantly, how can you join locally. Let me just say one thing about the logo. In the logo, you will see in the very, very center a bird. To be more precise, it's a phoenix, and it's a phoenix rising out of the ashes of the U, which was our symbol of hope and it's also a universal Christian symbol of the resurrection. So why have I started Rebuild Ukraine? Because, as Professor Itkin has already mentioned, the matter is deeply personal to me. My own elderly parents are presently refugees in Lithuania, and this is the second day of the war, and this was the day when we persuaded them to move out from the suburb of Kyiv and towards Ukraine's western border. And what you see here is their 6-day journey through what turned out being 6 countries. And as you can see, they only had 2 flat tires on their way through central and western Ukraine towards the border with Moldova, and then Romania. And in Romania, they had this wonderful little cottage that was provided for them with warm food. And so, you know, it's incredibly important, the kind of the hospitality that's being presently offered by the neighboring countries to the refugees is just overwhelming, really quite extraordinary. And then subsequently, they actually safely made it to Lithuania, where my brother has been living for the last 5 years. And so early on, already in late February, we understood that what we could offer Ukraine was a unique network of individuals with business experience who would be able to provide the goods into Ukraine, do so swiftly, cost-effectively, and also function in a high-trust environment such as Lithuania. So what precisely are we doing? What is our process? Well, we send grants from the United States into Lithuania. We acquire humanitarian aid and various types of goods, and then subsequently through the border with Poland, we send the goods into Ukraine to our distribution center in Ternopil. In Ternopil, we have staffers, about 10 of them, and those staffers subsequently distribute the aid to volunteers, and we have the capacity, Rebuild Ukraine has the capacity to deliver humanitarian aid to the front lines. And as you can see, we service more than 60 directions, and also to the hospitals. And that also includes mobile clinics. So we have a growing number of volunteers, and also during the first 2 months of the war, have distributed 250,000 in aid. Much of that aid being gathered precisely here from fellow Minnesotans. So what is our signature item? The primary piece that we are providing at the moment is the tourniquet. And a tourniquet is essentially a bandage which a soldier deploys in a situation where a soldier has a bleeding wound. So this is our tourniquets in Ternopil, and then this is a tourniquet, essentially how it's meant to be on the soldier's arm, and each soldier is supposed to have 2 of them. So we've been able to deliver 5,000 tourniquets in the first 2 months of the war, and what that means is that our tourniquets are actually saving lives every single day. Conservatively, probably dozens of lives, but perhaps presently already in the hundreds. What else are we supplying? We are supplying also prescription medicine, and specifically we focused on 3 categories. Thyroid hormone deficiency medicine, and that's the so-called L-thyroxine, and that's what you see here on the photos. Then meds from diabetes, high blood pressure, and antibiotics. I mentioned early on that the compromise of the infrastructure and the disruption of the supply chain has meant that you have the pharmacological products not reaching to where they need to be. We have social media intelligence to determine where the prescription medicine is needed. We also have the ability to subsequently verify the end users and supply the quantities of medications that are required by hospitals, clinics, etc. We also discovered that it was highly effective to supply what one would call a Ukrainian jerky. And so we produce dried meat in Western Ukraine and then send it subsequently to the troops or also to the civilian areas where there are food shortages. And so what you see on this picture is one of the cars, one of the vans that is bringing our supplies. The soldier is fully equipped by us, and that includes camouflage uniform, boots, fleece jacket, backpack, and protective goggles. And so we've now supplied hundreds, if not thousands, of soldiers like this one. And himself is now also being deployed to the Kharkiv area specifically. You've heard of the massacres of Bucha. Bucha has been in the newspaper lines for quite some time. What people are not aware of is, of course, that Bucha itself needed to be liberated, from the Russian invaders. And so this soldier was fully equipped by us, including his boots. So our boots are in Bucha, and our sniper backpacks are in Chernobyl area. Chernobyl was another area that needed to be cleared, of the Russian invaders. As you know, they, for a period of time, controlled a nuclear power station in Chernobyl. We experimented for a while also with the delivery of used SUVs that could serve as multi-purpose vehicles. And so here you see our Lithuanian drivers delivering a used, I think it's a Toyota Land Cruiser, and an old Nissan. And here are the same SUVs already serving special forces. So we have the capacity to acquire things in Lithuania swiftly and then deliver them into Ukraine fairly quickly. Turning now to the help that we are offering refugees. I mentioned the fact that any war is a war on children. And so early on, we discovered that there was a need for an establishment of a teacher cooperative in Budva, Montenegro. So what happened was more than 100 families with their small children fled specifically to this area, to Budva. And this wonderful enterprising woman, Yulia Matsui, who happens to be known to my brother and actually works part-time for his organization, Semantic Force, decided that she wasn't going to remain complacent and organized with another woman, organized this wonderful teacher cooperative. Now, the scene looks very blissful, as you can see kids studying on the shore of the Adriatic Sea, but the underlying reality is quite serious, and the underlying reality is that for a period of time, this cooperative did not have classrooms, and perhaps even more importantly, you have to realize these young families left without husbands. So very often it's a mother and children left and husbands left, the husbands stayed inside the country defending it. And so here you see the kids studying in what is a dance studio, now converted to a school. And so what exactly is then Rebuild Ukraine providing? Well, it's providing by now education for over 150 refugee children. And our estimates are that this number will remain strong at least until the end of summer. We're providing also 25 part-time refugee teachers with salaries. We're providing them with classroom space, and that involves several classrooms. We're talking about grades from 1 to 10, and also with school programs and supplies. And if you can imagine this, we're actually able to do this for a little under 20,000 a month. So we're very cognizant, we approach this also as a small businessman would approach the matter. And that is, we're also very concerned about essentially how the dollars are used, and more importantly, what good do they make for the people that require help. And so, to conclude then, how can we all join in the effort of helping to rebuild Ukraine? Let me just address the students specifically. One of the ways in which you could do this is by becoming a student ambassador. We in fact already have such ambassadors in our community, and it would be great if their number grows. Now, what precisely does it mean to be an ambassador? Well, you are an ambassador, for example, if you call or text 3 friends and simply tell them about our programs. There is a variety of ways in which you could tell them about the programs. And one of them is simply by sharing an article that it was in this week's, the Sunday newspaper, Pioneer Press, ran a front page article on the wonderful and courageous work of our team in Ukraine and Lithuania. So simply sharing with them the TV report that was done by KSTP station or by Pioneer Press, I think that should probably be enough. Or simply share the kinds of things that you've heard today, be it tourniquets, or be it prescription medicine, or be it protective gear, or the help for children. Just share with them one bit of what you heard and ask them to join us in our efforts. We're also heartened by the fact, by the way, this is very, very enterprising students also at a private college like ours in Illinois. As you can see, this is their annual dunk contest, dunk tank contest. And I believe something like 15 students were dunked as a result. And so this was a fundraiser for Rebuild Ukraine. This was also something very touching, and that is apparently recently there was a World Tai Chi Day, and a group in Stillwater celebrated it again by donating the proceeds from this fundraiser to the work of Rebuild Ukraine. We've also run a number of fundraisers at various churches, and as you can see, Catholic, Lutheran churches, Church of Christ, represented here, and also we were quite honored that the Westminster Abbey dedicated its Easter collection to our efforts. So as you can see, there are plenty of ways to help, but if I were to focus on one way to help, I would say this, that if you had $25 to spare, you should know that this $25 fully delivers to the front lines one tourniquet. And if we could save lives one tourniquet at a time, I myself would be a very, very happy man. Thank you very much for your attention.